For our industrial design project, we're going to be creating a toy vehicle. Once you've selected the vehicle that you want to create by making a rough drawing, you can then proceed to Illustrator. Open Illustrator and then go to File, New, choose a single artboard or single page up here. That should be the default settings on 1, size A4, and orientation horizontal. Okay. Now we're going to be using just a limited number of tools. We'll be using this black arrow called the selection tool, the white arrow which is direct selection tool. We're going to be using the rectangle tools, rounded rectangle tools, ellipse. Probably that's as much we'll be using from the shape selection. And finally we have to become let me just get out of that. Finally we need to become acquainted with the fill and the stroke concept. Alrighty, we'll be using the rounded rectangle tool, so let's select that and click and drag. So what we have, let me just click off that. You can hold down the command key, which gives you the black arrow. It changes from the rectangle tool to the selection tool just by holding down the key command and then just click off. Or you can just go and select the selection tool. Now what we have is something quite simple, a rounded cornered rectangle with a black line and a white fill. We don't understand what a white fill is until we actually change that color. So let's select the object by clicking on it or clicking on the line, going to the swatches on the right hand side palette and just choosing a color. There we have it. Now we can see how this has changed the stroke and the fill. I can change that color to whatever color is required of me. However, it will only work if it's on top of the stroke. If the stroke was on top of the fill and I went to my swatches, all it would do would be changing the stroke. You can't quite see what's happening there because the stroke is so fine, it's only 1 point. Let me increase that to say 10, and now you can see the effect of the stroke. So let me change the color of the stroke. There we have it. Now this is changing only because the stroke is on top of the fill. If I click on the fill and place that on top of the stroke, I can now go back to my swatches and change the fill. Okay, let's create a few more shapes and people rectangles. Now let's, for each one of these rectangles, change the stroke and the fill. So the fill's on top, so I'll start with the fill. Click on another one, click on another one, and so on and so on. Okay, now let's change the stroke. Put the stroke on top, go to swatches, and let's select and change, select and change. Right, so that's the principle of the fill and the stroke. Let's just get rid of all that. What you can do is, if you're on the selection tool, you click and drag and select all those objects, then go to delete. Okay, now the next thing we need to learn is how to use Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is our main tool for this exercise. So we've got a rectangle, and we've got another rectangle. Now I'd like to combine these two rectangles. So what I need to do is select both, and all I've got to do is just click and drag over two of these, not over the complete objects necessarily, just simply just touching those two. And I'll just click out of that so I can show you from scratch where to find Pathfinder. We go to Window and Pathfinder. Click on that, and you get a whole bunch of tools that you can combine, separate, subtract, add together. What we're going to do firstly is unite these two to become one shape. So that's the first one of the Pathfinder tools. Unite. Click on that, and now we have one shape, a bit more complex than the original rectangle. Let's draw another. This time maybe take a circle. We select the ellipse. In order to create a circle, we need to hold down the Shift key. The Shift key is critical for circles and for squares. Anything that has to remain proportionally the same. So hold down the Shift key, then click. There we have a circle. I'll go back to my selection tool, and I've got a circle. I want two circles. So Control C, or Command C, sorry. Command C, Command F. Now we have copied and pasted that circle and placed it on top of the one that's been copied. So if I just go to my little arrow cursors, I can shift that across. If I hold the Shift key, I get big chunky moves. If I don't hold the Shift key, I get little moves. There we have it. Okay, now I'd like to punch a hole into that odd rectangular shape, and two little circles will be those shapes I want to cut out. So I go now to Pathfinder, having selected all three objects, go to the second tool, minus the front from the back, and click. And now I've got a more complex shape again. You can see the potential of the cutting away, because you can imagine how wheels would work. I might just show you Command V. There is actually Command F. That's better. The way we change scale in Illustrator, if you want to change the size of something, you just go to the corner of a selected object right here, but importantly, hold the Shift key. Shift keeps proportions, and drag, and now I can move it back into place. You can see what I was thinking. Little wheel inside that cavity. Okay, so why don't you guys have a play with a couple of rectangles. First use the Unite tool, and then use the minus the front from the back.